Hi, good evening. Welcome. I'm Julie Jacobson, Town Manager, and I want to welcome all of our town meeting members who attended tonight. And to those who are not here or could not be able to, I just want to let everybody know this is being taped, so it can be replayed on Auburn cable television. It's also being live streamed, which is a new system that we have, so that members who aren't necessarily able to see it on a television can watch it through a computer. So someone could watch it live right now. So just to back up for a second, we did notify all the town meeting members by mail, sent out code red calls, and put it on our, I think we put it on our website, so we're really doing our best to get the information out to members. If any members are watching and not here tonight, please don't hesitate to call us with questions between now and town meeting. Not that you can't ask them at town meeting, but we find, hopefully, if you have a question we can't answer, we want to have time to get that information to you, so by the time you get to town meeting, we've been able to respond to any concerns that you might have. So, as you can see, the format tonight involved the first half hour just walking around talking to many of the employees and consultants who are here this evening, as well as just looking at some of the concept plans. So why are we all here? It's to talk about Article 26 on the May 7th, 2019 annual town meeting warrant. Article 26 reads, to see if town meeting will vote to authorize the borrowing of $1.2 million to fund non-participating roadway enhancements and right-of-way costs associated with the Mass DOT Auburn Street Reconstruction Project or act on anything relative thereto. So the purpose of us being here tonight, I won't take too much of your time, I'll turn to the experts here, is to just explain to you why this article is on the warrant, why we want to get this done, and what the impacts are to you as taxpayers. So why do we want to invest in these improvements? So hopefully you've had a chance to look at what some of these are. We're going to verbally explain them as well. But these improvements, the whole Auburn Street project, implements a number of different strategies that have been identified in many plans that have been done over the years. I didn't go back before that because I thought 13 years is okay enough to go back. So starting with the 2006 master plan, Drury Square was identified numerous times, and some of the concepts that we're proposing here were specifically identified as strategies to address in the master plan at that time. Right now, we're updating that master plan. We're starting all over again, new master plan. Process has been going on about 3 years, and our new master plan, and our planner, Adam Menard, will tell you that almost every chapter and almost every meeting in the last couple of years has addressed Drury Square as being a major area that we need to focus on. We also, in 2017, we had a grant, and through that grant, we did a Drury Square vision plan that was entirely focused on Drury Square and identified assets, challenges, strengths, and strategies for enhancing Drury Square as a so-called downtown area. And I say so-called because it is unique. We don't really have a real identifiable downtown area as some other communities do. But Drury Square, other than this area, which I know was the original, but really the activity is taking place down at Drury Square, as is the traffic. So what we're trying to do is enhance that area, make it safer, make it more pedestrian friendly, and make it a better place, more aesthetically pleasing, and easier for businesses, residents, pedestrians, shoppers, and drivers. All of that was identified in the Drury Square Vision Plan. And we also have a 2017 Economic Development Strategy Plan that we also got a grant for. That was a $25,000 grant. It was about a year-and-a-half process. All of these processes we went through numerous, and in several cases, years worth of public meetings, public hearings, community meetings, input gathering. We have tried, as have all these previous plans, to make sure that we're giving the residents and the businesses in town and the property owners an opportunity to give us input on what your goals are, what your priorities are, and then develop these plans. So these plans were all vetted. They were community-driven plans, and now we're looking to implement some of the major strategies in those plans. So many of the strategies in each of those plans call for improvements to Drury Square, including infrastructure improvements, pedestrian-friendly access, aesthetic improvements, and promoting commercial development. That's a pretty consistent, those four themes. Many of them also identified the need to capitalize on our municipal parks and open spaces. And again, Drury Square has a lot of municipal land, a lot of municipal facilities, school, library, fire station, park, and we're memorial areas, so we're looking to capitalize on the beautiful assets that we have as a community that are recreational or open space in nature. And the 2006 master plan, the very first page of it, really interesting. If you go back and see it, and it's on our website, the very first pages of that identified Auburn 2020 vision statement. And if you read the vision statement, the good news is some of that has been implemented since 2006, and it was to what would Auburn look like in 2020. Well, we're in 2019, and many of those strategies have been implemented and many have not. This project would address numerous strategies that show in that vision plan. I put this up because this was from the 2006 master plan. You can take a look at it after. It just showed the economic development map, and the thing that caught my eye on this map was identifying Drury Square as an area that should be enhanced for pedestrian activity, an area that should be enhanced for commercial activity, an area that should have zoning changes to make it more attractive to investors, businesses, retailers, pedestrians, and their customers, and also to identify state and federal grants that may be available to implement the infrastructure, which brings us here tonight on the roadway improvement projects. I would consider it a partnership with the state, and those much better at this than I will are going to explain to you the state roadway portion, but that's exactly what the master plan was trying to accomplish 13 years ago. Let's see if you can, I can't see it that well. One other thing, there is another article on the warrant. It's a Drury Square village bylaw, and is it Article 32? And I want to make sure I got that one right. It's a large warrant, Article 32. They are completely separate. Tom had asked me about that tonight, so just in case anyone else was curious about this, they are two separate articles. They are independent of one another. If one goes and the other one doesn't, it doesn't jeopardize the other project. I will tell you, if both are approved, they each complement each other extremely well. And Adam Menard, our town planner, is here to answer any questions on the bylaw itself. After this is over, we'll focus on this piece of it, but we don't want to not answer your questions on that article as well. I will tell you on that article, because we've been asked by some people, how did that happen? How did we get to that? That has been in the works for about 1.5 years, and there have been 8 public hearings on that. There were 2 meetings that we specifically invited town meeting members to explain this to them. There was one meeting that we invited only the businesses, was open to the public, but we focused on the businesses in Drury Square. Then there were 3 additional community meetings where we just invited everybody to come and comment on it. We took all the comments from all of those public meetings, incorporated them into the bylaw, brought it to the planning board. Planning board had 2 hearings and unanimously approved it, I believe, last month. So the bylaw that you see in the warrant has been vetted through the community, through 8 public hearings and 1.5 years worth of research and work and public input. So, to get to this project, what are the enhancements and the right-of-way costs of $1.2 million? And Bill Coyle, our DPW director, he's going to introduce the team, and he's going to really give you the details. I just want to be kind of broad here. About $300,000 of the $1.2 million are what we assume will be the estimated right-of-way costs that are required in order for the state to go forward with their portion of the project. The remaining $900,000 is to add the enhanced infrastructure improvements that the state would not pay for. And these include enhanced lighting, the ability to put flowers and plantings and banners, benches, gazebo, landscaping, trees, greenery, just making it try to look more attractive. The roadway improvements will make it safer. We're trying to enhance the look of it and the usability of it and the friendliness of it. So we encourage residents and visitors not just to drive through Auburn, but to stop, stay, use our parks, go visit our retailers, have lunch in the park, go see the pond. There are things there that people just drive right by, and we're trying to slow all that down, have them take a look, but still keep it functional. You've seen the conceptual designs, so a question was asked, Dan, we spoke the other day, so thank you for asking. He said, Julie, have you guys looked at what the impact of the borrowing is? So I didn't want to, without going through all the analysis, I told you I'd get back to you, so I thought this would be important for everybody. So our assessor, Cindy Cosgrove, and our assistant town manager and CFO, Ed Kazanovich, worked a lot on this, and Ed was saying that we would probably do a $1.2 million 10-year borrowing on this for a bond. I would tell you that we don't need all 1.2 in 1 year, but we do need the approvals of it all at once. The right-of-way work would be the first part of it that would get done, and that would probably be in the first 6 months to 1 year. The remaining $900,000, depending on how the project went, would probably be toward the end of the first year and into the second year and beyond. But how we would fund it, we would do a BAN, which is a short-term borrowing. The interest is insignificant on a BAN. We do that with our school projects, all of our borrowing projects. And then when the project's done, we would bond it. So when the project is done, we would do a 10-year bond. So based on an average residential single-family value, and this is from the assessor's office, this is all data-driven, of $263,291, the impact on the residential, the average single-family residential property of that value would be $18.43 that year. 1 year. Now, that gets built into your tax rate, so it goes into your bill the first year. That's the increase in your bill the first year. It doesn't compound. In other words, it stays there. So in the next year, it is still in there, but you're not adding another 18.43. So $18 for the year, it's built in, so over 10 years, you're talking $180 total over 10 years. Commercial, higher, $103.13. In that initial year, and then it's already baked in, and industrial, $128.06. And if anyone wants to know what the impact is on the actual rate, the impact on the tax rate is about 7 cents on the residential and 9 cents on the commercial, based on our current rates. Of course, if those rates change over the years, that will change. That's based on today's rates. That's all I have. Just wanted to give you that brief background, and I want to turn it over to Bill Coyle, who can introduce our consultants and explain, and then the process is after you explain everything, we're going to open it up for questions on this, and then when the questions on this article are done, feel free to ask us questions on other articles. We're here. We're more than happy to answer. We also have Darlene Coyle here, who's a director of the Development and Inspection Services Department, in case there's anyone has any questions on that. Jeff Mitchell, our Assistant DPW Director and Sewer Superintendent, Joanna Paquin, our Civil Engineer, and again, Adam Menard, our Planner. So we just want to make sure you feel that you're getting the answers you need to make an informed decision on Tuesday evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And I want to thank everybody for coming this evening, giving us the opportunity to explain the project to you in detail, and if it will allow you to have any questions relative to the article to ask us tonight, we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't have an answer for you tonight, we'll certainly try to get you an answer before town meeting. Before I start, I want to introduce the members here from VHB, our design consultant, Vanas Hangen and Bruslin. Greg Russell to my immediate left. Greg is the design engineer for the project, and Steve Didarian. Steve is the landscape architect for the project. So many of you may be familiar with the project, but I want to give a little bit of history before I turn it over to Greg and Steve for their presentation. But this project begins, it's Auburn Street, beginning at Walsh Ave, and extends approximately 3,000 feet to just shy of the Central Street and Packagug Street intersection. It includes reconstruction of Auburn Street from Route 12 to the Central Street area, and a mill and overlay from Route 12 to the Wall Street area. The project also includes reconstruction of the sidewalks, bike lane accommodations, new traffic signal at the Auburn Street and Brotherton Way intersection, pedestrian improvements to the signal at the Auburn Street and Route 12 intersection, pocket parks that Mr. Didarian will explain to you a little more detail. The project, some of the history goes back to 2013. The town initiated this project by requesting it through Mass DOT. Very competitive process. We originally requested this project at $1.5 million, and it was approved in 2014 when we started this process. And over time, the project, between modifying the scope to some of the reconstruction areas, including some signal modifications to Route 12, the estimate is, and also bridge rail work on the Auburn Street Bridge over Dunn's Brook is something we're also looking at. We're currently around $3 million with the estimate. It is programmed on the Transportation Improvement Program, which is called the TIP, which allows the funding to be 80% federal and 20% state funding. We are programmed for the 2021 TIP year. What that means is the earliest we can advertise our project is October of 2020. The project is currently in the 25% design phase. There will be a public hearing probably in late June. There will be notification in the local newspaper in Worcester TNG relative to the hearing, and everybody will obviously be invited. We have drawings set up in the back of the selectmen's meeting, which, if possible, we'll leave those here for people to view over the next week and try to keep those set up as well. The consultant did indicate they'll leave those drawings here. So if anyone's interested to come in during the week, obviously during the normal work hours, you can come up and look at the plans, and certainly call my office if you have any questions. The important part that Julie did touch upon on the 1.2 million is, out of the 1.2 million, $300,000 is estimated for the right-of-way costs. That's based on a cost to hire appraisers to go in and estimate the value of any easements that we need, temporary and permanent easements. We will certainly be looking for donations from the abutters, especially the temporary easements, to allow us to go onto their property, do temporary grading, sloping, paving, which would not be a permanent easement. There will be some permanent easements, I believe, for some of the infrastructure in the roadway, and we would have to also do appraisals on those and potentially compensate the property owners as well. So the $300,000 is an estimate of what we need to secure the right-of-way, and we need to have the right-of-way in place before Mass DOT will advertise the project for construction. So that's very important. If we don't have the right-of-way in place, which if we don't have the $300,000 to fund it, the project will not get funded and the money will go to another community. So that is obviously a very important part of the project. In addition, we are looking to provide some streetscape improvements relative to brick feature strips along the sidewalks. It'll be a stamped brick. We will have landscape trees. There will be ornamental street lights provided, and also some what we call pocket parks as well, and park benches, and I think Mr. Darian will go over those details a little more with you. Important to note as well is that because this project is being constructed by Mass DOT, they will be funding a portion of the street lighting. They will pay for all the underground conduit, so the piping that you run the wires through, they'll pay for. They will pay for all the foundations for the street lights. That cost is estimated about $400,000. If we were to do the work without Mass DOT participating with that item, we would be at least $500,000, because there's also roadway repairs that would have to be done if we weren't doing it as part of this project. So the savings is at least $500,000 that we don't have to pay for, because Mass DOT and the federal government will participate in the costs of the ornamental lighting. And after the presentation, we will stay here if anybody else has any questions. And if you have any questions back at home, feel free to call my office at 508-832-7814. And with that, I will turn it over to Greg Russell to run you through the project. And once he's complete, and Mr. Darian will be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Bill. All right. So, like Bill said, my name's Greg Russell. I'm a project manager with VHB. With me is Steve Zadarian, who's the project landscape architect. And we're just going to quickly run through our project team here. So, from a DOT perspective, the town is the proponent for the project. The town hired VHB to develop the design plans and bring it through the Mass DOT process. Once that is complete, DOT takes over and with regards to do the construction and add construction admin.
I was using the down arrow. Just use that one. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. Nope. And
Yeah, let's do this. Let's close out some of these. So while they're fixing that, and it's a good chance, I did want to add a couple things. I was going to add them at the end. I'll add them now, so give them an opportunity. I mentioned it to Tom, I believe, but wanted to let everyone know we're also working with Central One Credit Union, and we are developing a new facade program for Drury Square, totally separate from this, but again, it's another enhancement to Drury Square, and through Central One Credit Union, they're going to be able to have businesses get low-interest loans and potential grant incentives for fixing up the front of their buildings and making them nice and putting up nice signage. Another thing, we just got a wayfinding grant. Again, this ties into this. Wayfinding grant that's going to help us with signage and designing signage. And we also received a design grant to help us with the facade program to help actually do renderings and designs of what the buildings could look like for those owners who may be interested in doing upgrades. Completely voluntary, you don't have to, but there's some great programs that we're doing this. And lastly, Senator Moore and Representative Frost over the last couple of years have asked me what our priorities are, what they could put in from this potential funding from the state. And as of yesterday, Senator Moore, I believe, had put in $50,000 for Drury Square in the state budget. I mean, we don't know if we'll get it or not, but if we do, that is another $50,000. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
thank you, Ed. So up here you see the project limits for the project running from Walsh Ave down past Brotherton Way in front of the mall, and a little bit up and down Route 12. Here, this is just reflecting the Drury Square vision plan that Julie had mentioned earlier, and this was kind of the driving force of some of the parks and streetscape that has been incorporated into this project that Steve will talk about in a little bit. Going back to what Bill started, some project history. The town initiated this project in 2013. They brought VHB on board. And since then, we've been working progressively to move the project forward through the DOT process. In 2017, we conducted a road safety audit at the intersection of Route 12 and Auburn Street. At that location, at that time, there had been 39 crashes in 3 years. It was considered a high crash location, and because of that road safety audit, the state has assigned money from a specific pot of money onto the tip, which has allowed some of that money to the tip value to grow some. That's approximately almost $600,000. The 25% design was then submitted in last April, in 2018. We received comments back after doing some field work, utility walks with utility companies, received comments back from DOT in September, and we've been working through that point to now, addressing those comments and trying to schedule a design public hearing, which will be one of the next steps. Project needs, among other things, pavement. Up here, we just have a couple examples. One's the crosswalk up by the high school, and the area down by heading towards Brotherton Way. There's some long-term pavement deterioration that's been happening along the corridor. This is most noticeable, I guess, southwest or south of Route 12, heading towards the mall. And then we have, it's been patched, the area along the corridor has been patched numerous times due to utilities, and some of those are starting to sink, as you can see through the crosswalk. Safety, as I mentioned, we've done a road safety audit at the request of the state at the intersection. Among other things, obviously there's poor sidewalk continuity throughout the corridor. Route 12 is a barrier with poor pedestrian accommodations. There's really no bicycle accommodations currently, and we're going to look to fix that, or improve that at least. And there's also missing non-compliant or no wheelchair ramps at all in certain locations. Some of our goals is to fix some of that. Streetscape, one of the things when you go down the corridor, there's really no distinction. There's large, wide-open curb cuts. There's really no distinction between the sidewalk, the parking lots, the driveways, the road, in some cases, in front of the fire station. There's a huge curb cut. There's no really definition of where the sidewalk is and where the road ends, where the driveway and parking starts. And across the street in front of the Verizon store, there's really, again, no definition between the drive aisle, the parking, and the sidewalk. So, project goals, we want to improve the roadway and the intersection safety for a variety of things. Specifically, we're going to, at the intersection of Route 12, we're proposing all new pedestrian signal equipment. This will provide exclusive pedestrian phases across that intersection. We're looking to carry the sidewalk across the island, the channelized, right turn channelized island, to connect that to the sidewalk on the fire station corner, to provide a continuous flow of pedestrian traffic. We're also proposing rapid flashing beacons at the crosswalk by McDonald's and the high school. Roadway, the pavement, drainage, we're going to try and reuse as much of the existing drainage infrastructure as possible. We will be adjusting it as needed, installing new catch basins where needed. Those will be with deep sumps, hoods to improve water quality. And for the majority of the project, mill and overlay will occur between Route 12 and the high school. Once we get past Route 12, right now it's being proposed to be reconstructed, a full-depth reconstruction or reclamation, one way or the other. But that's a more intense process due to the failing pavement in that area. We want to look at complete streets where we want to improve the sidewalks throughout the corridor, provide a continuous ADA-compliant path of travel, including crosswalks and wheelchair ramps, and then we're providing bicycle accommodating shoulders throughout the project. So these are 5-foot shoulders, bike lanes on the side, the entire length of the corridor, within the project limits. And then streetscape enhancements, we're looking to provide landscape buffers where we have space between parking and the sidewalks, between the roadways, try and break up some of the curb cuts and provide a more welcoming flow to the corridor. So I'm going to go through the corridor, or the roadway design. These are the same slides that are in the back of the room that will be set up. And then I'll go through this, and I'll turn it over to Steve to go over the landscape. So starting at Walsh Ave, we're going to have one crosswalk on the north side of the high school driveway. This one has a rapid flashing beacon. And then we maintain the left turn lane going into the high school. And then as we move past the McDonald's driveway, we transition to a two-way left turn lane. We looked at numerous ways to kind of reduce the pavement width, but due to the high number of curb cuts along the corridor, there really wasn't a good place to either implement just occasional left turn lanes, or narrow it down to one lane, just because we felt that the abundance of driveways would result in traffic issues up down the corridor. So this is kind of the solution that we have come up with at the time. Moving down past the high school, we have the first of the pocket parks just before the brook crossing. And then we're also on the bridge. The initial intent was to leave the bridge alone, basically cut at either end. The state came back and requested that we take a look at replacing the guardrail leading up to the bridge. And that, in turn, leads to needing to basically replace the existing bridge rail over the bridge. So we are looking at that now. That could be done in a few different ways. That may require replacing the sidewalks over the bridge. So we are still looking into that and dealing with Mass DOT on how best to approach that issue. And as we go through, you can see we're adding landscaping where we can. This is in front of the post office property. We've tried to better define the parking area there. And that brings us to the Southbridge Street Route 12 intersection, where again we have another park on the northwest corner by the basketball court and tennis courts, and then a larger area on the southwest corner by the fire department. This includes, we're also including kind of refurbishing the island. Right now it's difficult to see when you're trying to make a right turn due to some of the vegetation that's there, some of the boxes. This was brought up during the road safety audit, so we'll be kind of reformatting that island to make it easier to see when you're making a right, as well as to carry the sidewalk all the way across and provide a continuous path for pedestrians. We're also adding some landscaping on the east side for the in front of the Verizon store in that plaza to kind of break up the parking. For the signal, right now we're proposing, as part of the road safety audit, one of the recommendations that came out of that audit was to convert the northbound Auburn Street approach to a left turn only and a through right. Where currently today it's two general purpose through lanes with a permissive left turn. The permissive left turn will still stay for the northbound. We're also, as another recommendation out of the road safety audit, the westbound Southbridge Street approach will be converted to a single left through and right turn lane. And there was a number of crashes that were identified by people using that right lane and people not seeing them and not being able to see the lights and moving into the intersection. So moving down past the fire station, again, some more landscaping, trying to define some of the parking areas, especially just south of the fire station. And again, carrying the sidewalks. These are 5-foot, standard 5-foot sidewalks, granite curb, all the way down. 5-foot shoulders with 11-foot travel lanes for the majority of the corridor. And then we get to Brotherton Way, where we have a new traffic signal. We'll be, for the most part, maintaining the existing lane use and providing new traffic signal, pedestrian crossings with exclusive pedestrian phases. And that carries us to the end of the project, where we tie in just before Central Street and end there. And now I'm going to turn it over to Steve to discuss the streetscape.
How do you advance to this?
Oh, just...
Okay, very good.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Steve Dudarian. I'm the landscape architect for the project. I think Greg's brought you through the overall corridor and given you a sense as far as the landscape design. But in the area, what we've tried to introduce is a much more pedestrian-friendly corridor, essentially. The sidewalks will have feature trim strips along the edges that are stamped concrete rather than brick, so they're very low maintenance, but they give it a pedestrian scale. Where opportunities present themselves, we're also introducing pocket parks, what we call pocket parks, small areas. The one that's indicated in this slide, that's a semicircle, is an area where there's already some memorials in that spot, as well as the historic cupola alongside it. And what we're introducing there will be a bike rack, as well as benches, some flowering beds that are very low maintenance using perennials, ornamental grasses, but simply it's kind of a gateway treatment as you're entering into the corridor at this point. On the opposite side of the road, by the post office, we'd be working with the post office, suggesting the idea of bringing in a green panel along the front of their parking lot. This is one of the locations where, as you drive down the corridor, it's very difficult to tell where the roadway ends, where the parking lot begins, because it's all pavement through there. Now we'll be introducing a new sidewalk, street trees along that edge as well, and in front of the post office, also dressing that up in collaboration with them. Proceeding a little bit further down, additional street trees where they can fit in, and we're also being cognizant of store signage, et cetera, trying not to block that, but creating a strong edge to the roadway. And let's see if I can do this. Okay. The Southbridge and Auburn Street intersection, we're introducing a park on the left side, which is, let's see, looking at this, okay, in this location here, it's easier for me to just point, where currently there's simply a path there. There's a metal guardrail along the roadway. You'd never even know there's a green space in that location. And working with the town, we've come up with a suggestion of introducing bollards in lieu of the guardrail. They'd also serve as, a protection device, but you can see through it to the space beyond, raising that area up more towards street level, so that you can see a seating area for folks in front of the basketball court, and introducing some trees as well, creating an informal edge along that pathway. And it's part of an overall design for that intersection, where on the other side of the road, we're introducing on a very steep slope that exists within the right-of-way, some plantings, and at the Verizon building on the upper right, in some of the gained green space that's part of this project, we're introducing some street trees, some ornamental grasses, flanking the sidewalk, so that you have a very nicely defined edge, but can still see the Verizon parking. The island in the center, the signal island, which currently is kind of a hodgepodge if you drive by it, of miscellaneous shrubs, perennials, other features out there, crushed stone, that would be basically redesigned to a much simpler design, introducing plant materials such as perennials, ornamental grasses into that area. So it becomes really a feature within that overall intersection area, again, announcing it as a gateway area. And on the lower right, alongside the fire station, when you go by here, this is the largest, lawn area, green space that's available. And basically converting that into a feature park with a backdrop that would be an evergreen screen towards the fire station, still leaving them some space to grow if they need to, introducing possibly a gazebo at the center of the park space, possibly with informal seating around it so you could have summer concerts, and introducing just a very informal walkway through the area with benches alongside it, flagpoles, et cetera. As was mentioned earlier, Auburn doesn't have a true visual town center. This would help create that in this area with all of these improvements, but especially with this. It's essentially like having a town green at this location. We've also provided some section views through here, giving you a sense. Let's see, okay, getting my bearings on this. Okay, it's easier. Okay, this section here is the section, that dark line, first dark line, A. This cuts through the pocket park to the basketball court on the right, and it gives you a sense of the slope that goes down to the basketball court, the terrace that we're creating at a higher level so that you can see, pedestrian activity in that area, the idea of benches through there, some flower beds as well, the ornamental lighting, possibly with banner arms as part of it, and the idea of the granite bollards edging this, so you now have a transparent edge, and you can see, oh, there's another one of Auburn's parks in this location. And these two sections, the top section is taken through the park area out to the triangular island in the overall intersection. And with this shows the idea of introducing a gazebo as a feature, the idea of an evergreen screen alongside the fire station. It's really just a blank side of the building there. So this would introduce some interest and a backdrop and possibly mound it up to get more mileage out of it. In the center would be the park space itself, along the walkway where you introduce flagpoles, ornamental lighting, seating, that sort of thing. And between that area and the gazebo, possibly have some seating as well, so you could have summer concerts out there and other activities. And the triangular island, that begins to give a sense of the idea of lower growing greenery, very low maintenance, and ornamental grasses, so that triangular island now has a cohesive design, that has some real interest as you're driving by. And the lower section is taken through the park to the Verizon building. And again, you can see the evergreen screen, the gazebo, the idea of a new holiday tree as part of the green, and some of the existing trees that would remain along there, the seating area, and then on the other side, on the Verizon building side, the idea of introducing some greenery on that edge as well. Currently, it's all pavement through there. This would now have a sidewalk with a secure backdrop of plantings, as well as trees and ornamental lighting. So in a nutshell, this takes an intersection that currently has some green space that's not well utilized, you'd hardly know it's there, makes that more pronounced so that you realize what an asset it is. And on the far side, where it's pavement, introducing sidewalks, street trees, greenery, and creating much more of a just an attractive center design. Okay. And these are just some slides of different treatments. We are leaning towards, in the upper left, the idea of concrete sidewalks with a stamped concrete edge as simply the most durable treatment that we could have here that's still attractive. And the idea of, again, introducing a gazebo into the park area so it becomes a true public space. It's basically what's called placemaking. And it really makes for an iconic image in Auburn Center. Okay, let's see, make sure I hit this right. Okay, the idea of bollards, which could be introduced along the edge of the tennis court area, which is currently all metal guardrail, so you really can't see what's beyond that. This would still preserve the safety features, but allow you to see in. And light poles, we're still in discussions as far as exact design of the light poles, but this gives you an idea of the range of opportunities as far as their design. And also the idea that you can introduce banners, especially in the center area, and also possibly some areas where you might have hanging planters. They're more of a maintenance item, but in feature areas that could be possible as well. The lights themselves would all be LED lights, which everybody's going to now. They're very energy efficient, and they really direct the light exactly where you want it to go. And just quickly, gamut of ideas as far as ornamental trees that could go in the park spaces, and street trees, screening trees towards the fire station at the top, and ideas as far as very durable plant material on the lower part, ornamental grasses, perennials, and then in the park space we might introduce some shrubs for seasonal color.
Would you mind going back one slide, please?
Sure. That do it? There we go. Yes.
Some of those trees are going to be rather large once they get going, correct?
That's correct. You know,
Will they fit into what we're trying to do?
they'll be used in different locations. The flowering pears, they remain fairly small and compact.
Correct.
Okay, wherever you have overhead wires, that kind of a thing, they're often selected. On the edges where that's not an issue, you could have larger shade trees that could be introduced in the green strips that we're acquiring along the frontage of a lot of the properties. So essentially, instead of having just a boulevard with all one tree type down it, which we'd like to avoid, that introduces what's called a monoculture, where if some kind of disease strikes, you lose all of your trees. We'd actually have it broken into sections of different types of trees down through the corridor. It's also a lot more interesting. I don't know if that helps. Okay.
And they would be planted to scale, and I think that's your question, but you wouldn't plant a tree in an area where you're trying to make sure we're not blocking visibility.
Correct.
Or
What I'm looking at are red maple, the red oaks.
Right.
Red buds usually don't do that well up here because of the cold seasons. Some of the spruces, you're talking some rather large trees within 5 to 10 years.
Right, the juniper and some white spruce would be used along the fire department. That's really the only place we're introducing an evergreen screen. And so it would be a varied screen with some larger plants and some smaller. As far as the redbud, I haven't had major issues with those out in this area, but I'll defer to you if you've run into that as an issue. The river birch, they're a very durable tree. Serviceberry, Amelanchier, is a native tree that's also quite successful. And the ornamental trees would be not used along the street edge. They'd be used in the park areas where they're pushed back from the salt of the roads, those kind of hazards.
So what type of trees would you be looking at as far as in front of Verizon?
That would probably be pears. Yep. And there's improved varieties now. There was a deal with pears a while back where they had an issue of breakage because they had a weak crotch area in the crown. And the Chanticleer pears, red spire pears, there's a lot that are much more upright now that don't have those issues. And they have fall color, which lasts among the longest of the trees as far as the fall color, and early spring flowering. You see a lot of them in flower now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Steve. Greg, you going to add, or are you all set?
Just going to take a quick through from the next steps from the DOT standpoint. So the goal here is to hopefully have a Mass DOT design public hearing for this project at some point in June. That's the next step. Mass DOT will come out. They'll bring a stenographer. Whole thing will be put on record. You'll be notified. Bill mentioned that. And then get that, and we can advance to the 75% design. We'll be working, hopefully, through the summer, with that being submitted at sometime in the fall. And then once the 75% design has been accepted, the town can begin the right-of-way process. And that's kind of the next big milestone for these projects, is getting the right-of-way. As Bill mentioned, the town needs to hire appraisers. They need to hire 2 appraisers, one and a review appraiser. And then that's a fairly lengthy process that will go through the the federal aid process. So there's strict guidelines as to how it has to be done. As that is going on, we'll advance the 100% design, and then with the goal being to advertise the job next fall of 2020, with the goal of having it in construction starting spring, summer 2021. And that's kind of the basic timeline moving forward. After that public hearing, moving to the 75% design is kind of when we want to make all the decisions regarding the type of streetlights. If there's any, specific trees, specific, if there's any type of pavers or whatever, that type of stuff we want to incorporate into the 75% design so that we're not changing things as we go, and we have a streamlined process, and Mass DOT has a streamlined process. So that's coming up. None of this is all set in stone, as DOT will continue to comment and the town will continue to provide input. So that's kind of where we're going to leave off, and I'll turn it back over to Bill for some questions.
Thank you, Greg. And it's important to note, too, that the public hearings are necessary in order to get public feedback. So the hearing in June, we hope that we can get as many people from the town to participate, and we welcome their comments. The consultant will be here, Mass DOT will be here to listen to what your concerns are, and then determine whether or not there should be modifications to the plan as they advance to the 75% design. So I'd be happy to open up if anybody else has any questions at this time. Yes, Mark?
Okay, good, thanks. Mark Knoll, town meeting member, precinct 4. Will you be putting the audio sound pedestrian lights in, and also put those at Packagug Street and Auburn Street? And between Southwood Street and Walsh Ave, to have a spot where a Worcester Regional Transit Authority bus could pull over on both sides with a bus shelter. And when you're pouring the cement for the sidewalks, you put the expansion joints in. Don't put them too wide, too deep. Someone using a white cane like myself, it stops you. Okay, thank you. And now the 75, is that a public hearing too?
No, the public hearing is at the 25% design level, which is where we are now. So the hearing will be in the next couple of months. And after that, that's the last hearing. Certainly, if anybody has any comments beyond that, we'd want to hear them very soon thereafter. Once we get to 75% design, the plan should be virtually complete at that point.
And what's the reason for not putting a signal light at that crosswalk near the high school? Regular traffic light?
It wouldn't meet the traffic warrants, Mark, that the federal government require, so it wouldn't justify a traffic light.
Has that changed? Because there's one on Cambridge Street in Worcester by the church.
But we will have a rapid flashing beacon for pedestrians, which will be push button actuated, and that will be audible too, Greg? And that will be also handicap accessible and audible.
Okay.
And to answer your other question, Mark, the traffic lights that are part of this project will be fully handicap accessible with audible pedestrian signals.
Because I asked once before to put them at Central Square, and it never happened, the audio sound.
Right, Central Square currently is not included in the project, Mark, so at some point, if there's work done to that, we can try to provide improvements there as well.
And something I haven't done for a long time is to cross Auburn Street at Southwood Street there, and you get halfway across and the pedestrian light, it changes on you. Can you make that longer?
Yeah, they will be adjusting that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Doug?
I might be a couple minutes myself. A couple.
Actually, Julie, the first one might be for you. Might be able to answer it from there. You were talking about, previously, there were 2 grants that were put in. I think it was your first slide. And I was just wondering what the current status on those 2 grants is. Do those still exist, or were those used up? And where are we at with those?
The 2 grants. I'm just trying to think. So the 2 grants, so I did mention verbally, not on a slide, that we have a grant, a wayfinding grant. So that one just came in about a month ago, and that one is to work with a consultant through CMRPC to develop some guidelines and concept ideas for people who want, for us too, for putting in signage in the area to try to identify the area. The other grant, we did get, we got the approval for it. It hasn't started yet, but that is a grant to help us with the facade improvement program, to help us with concept designs for what the front of a building would look like if a building owner wanted to take advantage of the facade
For
program.
this project specifically?
No, this
or just in
is, this is for Drury Square only.
Okay.
But it complements this project, but it's not, it is not tied to this project. It's just another piece of what we're putting into Drury Square. There's about 7 or 8 different components of it, and that's
I thought they were older grants, and I was just wondering whether they were...
No, those 2 just came in within the last couple of months.
Okay, thank you. I do have some other questions or comments. One thing you mentioned was you want to make it more attractive to businesses to come into the area. I know there's been a little changeover with businesses in several of those buildings going up. There's office parks with doctors and dentists and so on. I'm just wondering whether, I know some towns try to focus things on small business or local business as opposed to the big box stores, and if there's any of that thinking here in Auburn to go that way, what we might do there. Town Fair Tires, it's a great place to get tires, so I'm not going to knock them. But yet, the concept, of a small mom and pop type shop is good too. There's good and bad in everything. The other thing I was wondering, and if you want to just take notes, there's a couple things, and then you can answer them together. If there's any sort of historical restrictions, I know this building has lots of historical restrictions on what you can do in this room specifically, but if there's any sort of historic restrictions on that area in question as part of this project, or any other special restrictions. Obviously, we have a railroad going through, and they're very difficult with rights-of-way. We have a river going through. There's wetlands and many other, things that probably tie your hands. Earlier, we had spoken about putting in all these bike paths, which is going to allow somebody to ride their bike from McDonald's to the mall, and after that, there's not much bike riding to be had. And, that was told to me that might be a restriction that the state puts on. They kind of tie your hands with that money. I would love to see the state give a waiver to that, or at least make it easier so you don't have to have, bike trails on bike roads on both sides. That being said, I think Auburn is very strongly in need of more bike access for kids. The town is divided by those highways, and they basically have Auburn Street, Water Street, and Swanson Road to get across from one side of town to the other if you want to go see your friends, and it's very unsafe for kids to get across town. And I've said that before as well. The $900,000 is going to make visual improvements, I think. Is that correct? Was that
Streetscaping.
Streetscaping.
Ornamental lighting.
I know we have an electronic sign in front of the fire department. Would we be getting a new one of those perhaps, or more move that to a more visible area? That would certainly be a recommendation that I would love to see something happen with that. Put it in a more visible area as a gateway to the town, so when people are coming home from work or traveling, if you're not going by the fire station, you don't see that. If it was closer to the intersection, it might make a lot more sense. We were talking about borrowing, and I was just wondering, when does this borrowing actually happen? You mentioned the project would not start until 2021. Are we going to have to go out and borrow that money starting this July? Or is that why we're putting in a warrant article for that now? And the other big question is, what other borrowing is going to be happening at that time? What other projects is the town going to be looking at? Because, I think there was a mention of what the impact, dollar impact is for taxpayers on this one particular project, but when you start adding that together with, 3, 4, 5 other projects, it starts becoming more significant. So that's something, it would be nice to have that whole package, for town meeting. I don't know if it's going to be, doable by this town meeting, but for people to know what they're actually looking at as far as their spending. Just bouncing around, and I'm just following, I made notes as you did your presentation. You were talking about some of the streetscaping, and one was with the wires. Are all the wires going to be put underground as part of this project?
No, if you want, Doug, I can try to answer all these questions. I don't know if you have more beyond that, but...
Yeah, I actually do.
Okay, so the answer to that one, no, the overhead utilities are not going underground.
Because that would be very nice to have protected wires for the fire department.
It would be
for
great.
Winter storms, things like that.
But that would be at a much greater cost than what we're looking at currently.
It was mentioned, the library area was mentioned, but I didn't see that on the map in the red area. Is that part of this project?
No.
Going up as far as the library? It's not, okay. Because coming out of the library onto Southbridge Street, it would, be very nice to have that maybe just be right turn only or something like that. You're talking about all the curb cuts and have people go up Swanson Road to go into the library, or not. I don't know, but that's for traffic engineers to figure out. But it seems like there's a lot of people cutting across Route 12 to go in there. As part of some of the pocket parks in some of that area, I don't know if if there's any talk of adding town Wi-Fi or anything like that for kids who are sitting there, something like that. Put up Wi-Fi for people passing through. And you mentioned a town green. Would there be any consideration to maybe downscaling some of this, avoiding some of the trees and put in an actual town green, and maybe downscale the gazebo and make it more of an open area, and maybe put like a hatch shell type of thing or a small thing in the back part of the park, as opposed to something that's enclosed so much, make it more open. So that way, when they're doing presentations, there's performances, things like that, we have an alternative to the Pappas Pavilion as well, or so you can do things at the same time. The seating area near the basketball court, is that going to be for basketball people? So if so, is there going to be an opening on the fence over there so people can get in and out of the court? Or is that going to be something they're going to have to walk all the way around to get in?
It would be seating for anyone in general.
And same with the bike rack. I don't know who's going to ride their bike and lock it up at a rack over on the side of the road there, but, it's a good thought. Yeah, and this other thing with the curb cut at the Shaw's building, there's a lot of people that, myself included, that use that to come and go, and it would simplify traffic if that were eliminated or changed somehow, so when you're pulling out, I'm not sure if it's right turn only right now. I don't think it is, but that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. I did jot these down, so I'll try to answer them as I have. So relative to the comment regarding the bike paths, which will actually provide a 5-foot shoulder, so it not only will accommodate bicyclists, but will also accommodate any vehicle breakdown to be able to pull off to the side of the road more safely than currently. The roadway width already allows for the travel lanes and the bike path, with the exception of maybe a foot of widening or so. So we have a lot of pavement out there, so it's more of reusing that pavement, and it is a requirement by the state for funding. So, and we are a complete streets community, so we are currently trying to accommodate not only the motorists, but bicyclists and pedestrians, so that is a requirement. In regard to historic restrictions, there are no buildings on the National Register of Historic Places within this corridor, so there would be no historic impacts. Relative to wetlands, I can tell you Mass DOT has a very extensive environmental review process. They look at everything that is required. So we will go through not just the town's conservation commission and a local review of the wetlands and DEP. The federal government has very strict guidelines. So we will go through every review process there is relative to wetlands. The 900,000, I wrote a comment down. I'm not sure exactly what that was referring to, but I believe that is in general what was that funding, I suspect. The ornamental street lighting was a big part of the project. Again, overall cost is over $1 million, but because the state will pay for approximately 400,000 of that, I believe our budget is just over $500,000 for the ornamental street lighting, with the state paying the remaining 400,000. Then in addition to for that 900,000 would be the brick feature strips, the streetscaping, trees, and benches, gazebo, all within the 900,000. In terms of the funding, and I might be further down, but we would need to borrow, and Julie can correct me if I'm wrong, but the 300,000 would be in the first year. We would need the 300,000 for FY20 so we'll be able to get the right-of-way, the appraisals, and acquire the necessary right-of-way, which, once the right-of-way is complete, we would then have to go back to town meeting for a vote to accept the right-of-way, because it will be permanent easements required. The second portion of the 1.2 million and 900,000 would be needed in FY21. So that we have to have all funding in place prior to advertising, and all right-of-way in place prior to advertising, which Greg mentioned is October of 2020 at the earliest, if we have everything ready to go, with construction to start roughly 2 years from now.
So that, was it 1.8?
1.2.
No, not million, but the impact on the tax rate, was it 1.2?
It was $18.
$18.48.
Is that just overall for the whole project?
That is for the entire 1.2 million.
So thinking the 300,000, is that going to have a smaller impact at the beginning than the 900,000, the greater impact?
We looked at the impact as a whole, and I'll tell you why. Bill kind of explained also, but basically it's 1.2 million, $300,000 for the right-of-way would have to be borrowed, as Bill said, in this coming fiscal year. But we need approvals for everything for the project to proceed at the Maytown meeting. So we would have, actually it turns into 3 borrowings. 2 bands, which is a short-term borrowing, one for approximately $300,000 for the right-of-ways, done this coming fiscal year. The second one for the remaining $900,000 for the town's portion of the streetscape improvements. That's still a short-term bond. We don't ever turn any of our bands into bonds, including the high school, the middle school, until the project is complete. So when the project is complete, it becomes a bond. And at that point, it would be a 10-year bond from that point. Prior to that, it's a short-term ban. That's how all of our borrowing is. I'll just add in, too, because I think you asked, Doug, about what are the projects right now, other than our CIP, 5-year CIP, which we do every year. That's already out there. It gets updated every year. We stay within the parameters of the CIP. We are very careful not to go above that. We spread out all of our costs. Right now, there are no major projects coming up. I can't promise you what would be in 3 years that is unforeseen. Those are things that you never know. I mean, a couple of years ago, unforeseen, we purchased $3 million for Southold Road. It was not on a CIP. It was something that came up. It was important to the town, and that was purchased. Things like that will happen. I can tell you there is a study going on right now for the public safety feasibility complex. That study won't be done until probably October or November of this year. Even when that study is done, even if that study were to say that we either need a new facility or we need to renovate existing facilities or expand upon those facilities, that is longer term.
Much more clear, thank you.
Thank you. And also, I just want to say, I liked your idea on Wi-Fi and other things. These are just concept plans, which is why we're here. nothing is set in stone. We wanted to tell you why we needed the $900,000. If you downsize the gazebo, if you change it to a hatch shell, if you move the trees, if all of those are things that would be done over the next few months. This is just basically getting the concept out that we think this is really critical to enhancing Drury Square for a lot of reasons, improving the safety, making it better for our residents and the public and the community. And I should mention that the Christmas tree, I know Bill was going to mention it, you'll see in there a new holiday tree. The tree we use now is failing. It's probably not going to be there too much longer, so we want to make sure that we have a replacement for that. That's become a really nice, significant community event for us. We draw, 300 to 500 people, families, for the tree lighting. It's a great event, and the tree looks beautiful year-round anyway, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to replace. It needs to be replaced regardless. If this project doesn't go forward, we need to replace that tree, and those trees are expensive. So I think we got all your questions. And I think, Dan, did you have a question? Did you want to come up?
Well, Dan's heading up. Just, Doug, your last question relative to right turn only on Shaw's and the library. If you do attend the public hearing, certainly bring those concerns up. They are valid comments, so we can take a look at them.
They're up there now, so I'll let you guys take it from here.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel Adjust, Precinct 4. A couple things I looked and thought of while the meeting was going on. I noticed you narrowed the crosswalk, you cut it from 2 to 1 in front of the high school crossing McDonald's. You know right well these kids are taking the shortest route. They're not going to walk 5 feet over and hit a button. They're just going to go right across the street. They're not going to look for the cars. Have you considered widening that crosswalk to a cross area, cross zone, with the 4 lights? So if they hit one, it's going to be set, here or set there, so you're going to end up with like 16 lights flashing at once, instead of just a single 5-foot, is that what they are, 5-foot crosswalk?
Those are 8 feet.
So it's 8 feet, so instead of one here at this entrance, one there, what about a cross zone? I've seen those in the past.
I'll let Greg answer.
Another thing was you're saying pulling the guardrail in front of the tennis courts. Years ago, we had a gentleman on the school committee, Todd Hammond, and Todd said, I really don't want to see the basketball courts, tennis courts in use until we get a guardrail up. What happened as soon as we got that guardrail up? Ba-boom, right through it. The bullies you're talking about, are they going to be as safe as a guardrail? Because I know myself, granite, I've actually touched a granite pole and watched it go whoosh, right over. Are they going to be able to withstand a car hitting those things?
So the intent is for them to be crash-worthy. One issue with the guardrail standards have changed since the guardrail was put in. So the guardrail in and of itself has to come out and would have to be replaced regardless. And from...
I mean, could the guardrail be, a small shrub if you're trying to hide it instead of...
If I could, I believe too, the Mass DOT, when they look at guardrail in itself is a hazard. So if a vehicle hits the guardrail, that is also a potential hazard for the person in the vehicle. So they're looking at what are they protecting and what is worse, is the bigger...
Protecting all the kids that are out in the basketball courts, the tennis courts, whatever else is there. If the person came through the guy, we're worried about the person on the guardrail, then we should be taking all the guardrails out on the highways.
But you have to look at both, Dan, and the ballards are crash tested. They are utilized, as the town manager just mentioned, in front of the courthouse area. So they're there to stop vehicles as well. So it's something where it's a balance. We want something that's going to protect kids playing and utilizing the courts, but we also want something that, is safe for the motoring public, the pedestrians, people using the basketball courts, and
I just want to make sure that it's going to be as safe right now as that, section of guardrail is at this time and moment.
And the Mass DOT will review it. If they see any safety issues relative to the bollards, they will comment on it.
One more thing, and I know it's a hair outside of the project. What about a crosswalk on Southbridge Street going to the library?
That's something that we could discuss with Mass DOT. I can tell you, normally, they don't favor what they call mid-block crosswalks,
I understand that.
so they would rather see people,
Because again, you know the kids aren't gonna strut up to the crosswalk up at the lights, hit the button, cross over, and then walk all the way down.
So one thing, if you come to the design public hearing and Mass DOT will be there, Southbridge Street, it's outside the project limits, but it's a state road. So if you bring that up at the public hearing, it goes on the permanent record. They will, there will be people from the district that are responsible for maintaining this section of road. That's something to bring up to them, and they may be, well, yes, they don't favor the mid-block crossings.
Correct.
But that would be the best, I think that's probably the
Because
best
I believe
way.
right now, when the kids take the canoes out into the pond, they have to have an instructor out there, it's a teacher or whoever it is, and they have to cross all the kids. They still cross the road, they cross the road with the instructor there. Why not make it safer for them?
that's something, again, Dan, bring that up at the hearing, because we only control the local roads. I have reached out to MassDOT in the future with that same request, and it hasn't happened yet, so certainly the more people that mention it, it may become something that they'd be willing to do, so bring that to their attention at the hearing, and it's a state highway, so it's going to be their decision.
Another thing is gentlemen, what about downsizing a little bit and going up the river? Because I don't know, on a nice day, it's nice to sit on a park bench and listen to the brook going by. But again, we got all the vegetation, trees, shrubs, bushes, weeds, and everything along that whole side of the riverbank going up past the school.
It wouldn't be something we could include in this project. It would be something we could look at separately, you know, maybe with environmental grants.
To have this meeting a week before the town meeting, I think it's a lot for us to think about and jam in there. I think this meeting should have been done a month ago.
I can tell you, to speak to that, several weeks ago, when this project was being reviewed for funding for the Transportation Improvement Program, there was discussion regarding moving this up and accelerating it 1 year. So we were looking to get this on a meeting as quickly as possible. And certainly without having the plans at 25% design level, we weren't at a point where we could really roll this out to the public. So, you know, we're trying to advance it as fast as we can, but at the same time, we need the plans to be brought to a level where we can present something, so.
So next week, what is the amount that you're seeking from town meeting?
1.2 million.
So it can't be broken down to 300,000 now or 900,000 now and then the remainder on?
The funding, if I could, the borrowing would occur that way. So whether or not we voted the 300 now and borrowed it the first year, and then next year the 900, by the vote of approving it at town meeting, the borrowing would occur, as you're saying. It would be 300,000 the first fiscal year and 900,000 the second fiscal year.
There's no way to break it down to like that on the votes?
Not at this point.
And I also want to comment on the bollards, because we had a lengthy discussion on the bollards, and obviously our first, I want to make sure everyone understands this, we also take the safety of the pedestrians and children as our number one priority, as does Mass DOT. The bollards are crash tested, they're very safe, and if you notice, they're also being used at most of the federal buildings now. Federal courthouses use them, courthouses use them. They're intended to stop moving vehicles at a high rate of speed that unfortunately may be intending to drive right into the building. So that's why you will see a lot of museums, federal buildings, and state buildings using bollards now in place of guardrails because they actually stop a vehicle better.
I mean, I have actually seen them with I-beams in the center of them.
So,
Correct?
Yes, and that's,
Is that what you're planning on using, the I-beams in the center of these?
I mean, there's different versions of them, but it would be something similar to that, yeah, where you would have something embedded in the concrete, and the bollard is a sleeve that goes over it.
Because, like, again, I hit a one,
Yeah, and
and I knocked a 10 by 10 granite, it just split and fell right over.
that's not, those are more decorative.
It's not crash worthy.
Okay. All righty. Well, I guess that's it, and it's just a lot to think about between
Dan,
now
if
and
you have
next week.
any questions between now and next week, feel free to give me a call.
No, you know I will.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Tom Dufour, Precinct 5. Something that came up in discussion earlier with Julie while we were looking at things, and I had talked with a couple other town meeting members who were here. One of the things I was thinking of, taking note of what you had mentioned as well with the crosswalks and with everything, and with Julie's conversation, the rate of speed that people tend to drive that corridor, especially if they're getting right off the highway, coming by, trying to zip in and out of McDonald's, zip in and out of Yangshing. There was an article a few weeks back in the TNG about the 3D crosswalks or the 3D speed bump type of thing. Is that something that's been considered for the Auburn Street area to try and bring down and reduce some of the speed?
I would say, and I'll see what Greg's opinion is, but I don't believe they've been approved by the Federal Highway Administration and wouldn't be conforming to MUTCD, but I'm not positive of that. Greg, have you had any information?
I saw the article, I think it was in this morning.
So we have some very strict guidelines that we have to follow so that we're consistent with pavement markings and signage throughout the whole country. So if you drive into a different state, you're not surprised by what you see. And there was also, I think mentioned in one of the articles, was that somebody actually went around it because they thought there was something in the road. So I don't think that they've technically been approved by the Federal Highway Administration as of yet, so it wouldn't be something that we could include in the project. But we could look into that going forward, because certainly that did get a lot of attention, and certainly worthy of looking at.
So because of that federal funding component, that would kind of dictate whether or not...
I wouldn't use them on any town road until the federal administration endorsed them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, Dan, before?
Well, I was going to say, the city announced this morning that they're going to start using those, but there might be a problem in the future because now the girls have hired a lawyer who invented those. So I would strongly recommend staying away from them.
Right, and I didn't see that, I didn't see the article, but maybe they're using them in areas that aren't on public streets?
School zone areas.
Right.
Again, but now the girls have hired a lawyer.
Sure, okay.
2 girls to try and act in that. So I would recommend staying away until we hear what the outcome of that.
Thank you. Doug?
Just kind of to tack on what Dan was saying, I think the engineers do, and DOT takes care of all the little details on safety. I mean, they have a lot of strict guidelines. But the thing that I keep hearing is, we don't go up, I don't know why the library wasn't included. You say that's not part of the area. Is that a done deal, what the actual area is, or can we increase that area? I would certainly think the library, and also, as he indicated, the Riverside area down near the school, that's important to really pick up as part of, the beauty concept and the aspect of tying it all in. And it would be really important and very nice to capture that as part of that. The other thing that is not really mentioned yet is the maintenance of this. Who's going to rake the leaves on all these trees we saw? We have trees planted along between the mall and, I don't know if it's Auburn Street or Central Street, we'll just say Central Square. There were crabapple and apple tree and ornamental cherry trees all planted along there, and the town used to mow those banks of the river and keep that very well maintained with ornamental flowering trees, and that's kind of gone by the wayside. The town recently has cleaned up that Goddard Rocket area in the park, and I've mentioned it to some other people here. I would love to see all that stuff taken and put up at the actual Goddard site, and I'd love to see a museum up there for Goddard. That would really, I don't think there's an actual Goddard museum anywhere in the country. There's various historic monuments and markers and things like that, but there's no real museum anywhere in the country for Robert Goddard, and I did try to look that up. And the closest we had was something at Clark University once, and I think that's, been moved out.
So Doug, the answer to your question relative to the limits, back in 2014, when the project was requested, the limits were defined at that point. You have some leverage maybe to go at intersections to go back a little further. So relative to the library, it's certainly something we can look at separately, though. That's not, you don't necessarily have to have this project go to the frontage of the library to say we want to put a crosswalk in front of the library. That's something we could pursue separately and doesn't have to be part of this project. The right turn out of the library is something that could be pursued separately. I can tell you, Mass Highway would probably fully support a right turn only out of both those driveways, is the businesses, and you'd have to look at it and say, well, how does that impact them? Not to say that that wouldn't be a safety improvement, it may be, because if you can only take a right out of the library, if you want to go left, you have to go through the signal. So there are definitely benefits to that. So it doesn't have to be part of the project for us to look at those things. So certainly we welcome your comments.
And I know a lot of the trend with the planning people is for low-impact development, and you see that swath of area that was between the firehouse and the road, and it goes from pavement to different pavement to cement back to pavement, and it's a little earth strip or something like that to absorb some of the water would probably go a long way to helping the low-impact development people be happier. And also the lighting, I hope you're going to consider just downward-facing only, dark skies compliant lighting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, one more quick thing. The crosswalks, are they going to be stamped or are they going to be cement? Because, you kept...
Dan, can you go up to the mic for the public, please?
I'm sorry. The crosswalks, is the whole crosswalk going to be stamped, or are you talking, or the sidewalks, or are you talking just a small strip on each side?
We had the 1 foot feature strip.
Just be right at the curb line, and then in the back would be just your normal concrete side.
Because what I'm thinking here, and I've seen it, what type of shoes do you have on? You have heels on, right? Those heels don't like them stamped grooves. And I've actually seen them in the crosswalks in the city. Go take a digger. I know women, they love their high heel shoes, and they hit those things and down and over.
Right. At this point, we're not proposing the brick in the crosswalks themselves.
I mean, you're saying that the crosswalks, you lose track of them going down the street. All the crosswalks going down Auburn Street are all concrete. All the driveways are all pavement. So I can see the difference. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about or what areas.
I think for the average motorist that maybe not be familiar with the town of Auburn, coming through, it may have difficulty. You know the town, we all know the town if we live here or work here, and but if it's someone who's not familiar with the town, it would be difficult probably to find out where these openings are. But so we try to better define them, and to Doug's point, the green space, we are adding green space in that area in particular that you talked about, so we are decreasing impervious area in a lot of areas, so certainly looking at low-impact development standards.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Julie.
Sure. I just also, if I can just add, because I think Doug had asked a question that I just found it in my notes, want to make sure I get to you on that. You asked about how we were trying to encourage business development and how this relates to that. So I just want everyone to be clear, there's two different articles. There's Article 26, which is the 1.2 million for the town's component. The state's component is not, that's nothing the town needs to approve. That goes through a whole state approval process. So we're really just focused on the 1.2 million. Combined, the project is about 4.6, 4.7 million. But the town meeting approval is for the 1.2. The Article 32 is the Drury Square District bylaw proposal, and that is the bylaw that has gone through, actually at this point there have been 8 public hearings on that. I think I mentioned it. It's been in the works for about a year and a half. It came out of the Drury Square Vision Plan, which in itself had, I believe, 4 public hearings. The Economic Development Strategy Plan that had 4 public meetings. So we've had a lot of input, so while town meeting is just hearing of this specific portion of the Drury Square, we have been talking about Drury Square for the last 3 years. all the different pieces that we want to put into place. This is one of them. So it's the 3.4 million, if 3.5 million is the state, the town's piece is the 1.2, and then that's Article 26, and then Article 32 is the Drury Square bylaw. And I just wanted to assure you all that through the process, and we actually did invite all town meeting members to two of the meetings on the Drury Square bylaw. And on that, I see a couple of you were here, and we took into consideration some of the questions you had, concerns, revised it. Adam Menard and the planning board worked on that, made some changes to it. The intent is, it's a very small area. And again, the intent of the bylaw is to encourage business development, to help retain the businesses we already have, as well as looking to the future. We can't just look at today. That's what the master plan was looking at, Auburn Vision 2020, and here it is 2019. It takes time to get these things in place. So we're looking at the next 10, 15 years. What is it we want to accomplish? And in the Drury Square area, and this has been talked about for decades, we want to make sure that area retains the character of as small of a town as you can, and recognizing it is not a small town, it's a major intersection, but character is something that's important. Sense of place is important, and that's where you need to feel like you want to go there. You're not just driving through there to get somebody else. And also on the Drury Square, I think the other important piece of this is, if you look at the area, and Adam can speak to it if I'm mistaken, but it's a very small area on the bylaw. Outside of that area, we do have big box. You mentioned big box. We're not trying to make any businesses that are already here go away. We want to keep them all. They're important to us. But we don't want to have big box in the middle of Drury Square. There are places in town that are appropriate for that. Drury Square is not. Likewise, I believe the bylaw looked at all different types of uses. Residents and businesses expressed concern about what type of retail, what type of commercial, what type of office. Our intent is to encourage mixed use. We would love to get some housing in that area, and by housing I mean mixed use. You have retail on the first floor, office on the first floor, apartment on the second floor. Bring people into the Drury Square area. It helps our businesses, it helps our towns. Who wouldn't want to live right in Drury Square and walk to the high school and walk to the mall and walk to some of these other stores that are there now and hopefully will be there in the future? So mixed use is an important part of that bylaw. So while they are separate, again, this enhances everything we're trying to do with the zoning. And we tie it all back to, if you look at the 2006 master plan, it was very, very specific as to creating bylaws in Drury Square that encourage commercial development, pedestrian activity, and pedestrian safety. And I believe that this project, both on the state side and the town side, meets all of those strategies, goals, and objectives that the town put into place in 2006 and that are still coming forward through the master plan process in the last 3 years from the town. Those are still priorities that the residents have identified for us. So we're trying to implement those priorities. We can talk about the plans for 20 years, but at some point you have to say, okay, that's it. We've got to make an investment. We've got to start implementing these plans. We've implemented many of them, but we're at a point where we can't implement this component without town meeting approval because it involves a borrowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Does anybody else have any other questions? Yes, sir.
Evening, guys. Precinct 4. A couple of questions. There was some mention of putting up hedges at the exit for Verizon. What kind of an obstruction would that pose? I'm kind of curious now because there's nothing there and it's sometimes tough enough to see with people coming in and out.
I think I'll defer to...
I think the idea was just to kind of put a planting bed tree, just some trees, just to kind of break. The idea was just to break up the parking lot from the sidewalk from the road. And
it would certainly, the state wouldn't allow any plantings that are going to obstruct the line of sight. So.
I know it can sometimes be a little tricky to get out of there as is. I was wondering, regarding the concept for the tiny concert area, I think it's kind of nice, but I am kind of concerned about parking downtown, because right now there's not really much by way of municipal parking. And I know there's been some conflict where people take over the Bed Bath & Beyond parking lot and Shaw's parking lot to the consternation of the tenants of those two buildings. Conversely, you've got basically the mall parking, you've got maybe across the street on Verizon, but a lot of that is still private parking. There's not really a whole lot to encourage people to come down, park outside these businesses, or may very well start putting up signs that say, Verizon only, Auburn pizza only, that kind of things, and then go walk over to this tiny little gazebo.
Sure. I mean, one of the things we could look at is we do have the parking lot adjacent to the fire station. That entire paved area, I believe, is owned by the town, and maybe provide signage just to let people be aware that that's actually, it would be a town lot or a parking lot, so it's better utilized by the residents and the public.
This issue came up at a couple of the hearings that we had on the Drury Square Vision Plan. It also came up on the Economic Development Strategy Plan. We talked about Drury Square was parking. So what we're trying to avoid is having parking in front of some of the buildings, so the zoning bylaw is actually trying to push some of the parking behind the buildings to create less of it right out front. But the comment had been made several times, again, about the lot Bill just mentioned next to the fire department. The library, when the library is closed, trying to get people down there at night for concerts on weekends, so the library would only be open for a few hours in the morning on a Saturday. The whole library parking lot is available Saturday afternoons, Sundays, and many evenings. It's still available. We also talked about ultimately looking at other parking opportunities kind of behind some of these buildings. We don't want to have parking in front of the buildings because that takes away that whole look of it. You're trying to get it behind. So there was a lot of talk about the Bed Bath & Beyond area in the Economic Development Plan and how future redevelopment of that ideally would bring the buildings forward to the street to make it more pedestrian friendly, a little bit more visually attractive, instead of driving down the street and looking at 4 or 5 acres of parking right in front of a building. So it would kind of be reversing it. But we recognize that there was some parking. There are some lots that we're looking at in the future to potentially, as Bill said, sign for event parking or sign for business parking.
Next question was regarding the fire department. One of the things that went on the mailer regarding this meeting mentioned the preemptive interrupter, I believe, for the fire department to make their in and out. Is that a replacement for what's currently at the intersection on Southbridge and I believe it's Auburn Street, or is this something in addition to that's actually in front of the fire department?
Well, I'll let Greg answer that.
Yeah, so this is, it's an optical signal that would go opposite the fire station. So it's a post with a receptor on it. So as soon as the doors open and the trucks are turned on, that catches the light, and that triggers the Southbridge street light. So it's kind of a combined system. It's similar to what was installed at the station on West Street.
They have a flasher now on that intersection.
They do, but so one of the issues with that, it originally had a hard wire to the station that they could push in the station and trigger that signal. At some point, that stopped working. So now the idea is that those receptors are only, basically the truck has to be pointing towards it. So there's not a lot of space for it to, they turn out, and then that receptor will pick up the signal. In this case, when the doors go up, it'll pick up the signal. That signal gets transferred to the main signal, which allows for the preemption to go through and hopefully should reduce the queuing in front of the fire station to allow them to make that turn better.
Regarding the ongoing study for potentially combining the municipal emergency services, we do face a prospect where we would be losing that building at some point. That would make the ornamental screening a bit odd looking, I would say. I'm wondering if we've had any consideration of maybe not doing that. I mean, if nothing else, I know kids love the fire department. They don't mind looking at it usually. It's kind of a fun thing for them, but that's just something that we might consider.
No, it's a great point. We just got the study underway. I believe it started maybe 2 months ago. It's still going to be looked at, but I know in some of the early initial meetings that we had with the consultant, they they felt that that was a limited, should something happen where a decision was made down the road that you don't want to have your fire department there, and I don't know that that's going to be an end result. I don't know what the results, but should that happen, the section that we're looking at is likely not developable as much because of the grade. We had a little concern about that. The fire station lot itself probably would be, but there was a little concern about putting too much down on that corner with access out onto Southbridge Street. So we could certainly look at relocating some of the trees in case something like that happens, but I would say that study will be done before this work starts. So before anything is even planted, we will have an idea in October as to where that study's going. And the study would most likely come back with a recommendation on that fire station, as well as the other fire station and the police station. It's still going to take lots of public comment, input. It's probably going to take a 3 or 4 year process to come up with what we're going to do.
Regarding the pocket parks, a question did come up, who would be responsible for maintaining those? And I'm curious about what kind of costs we're looking at ongoing past the construction.
So the maintenance would be through the DPW. I can't tell you that I have an actual cost of what it would be. And certainly, I wouldn't be behind this if I didn't think we'd had the staff to be able to maintain it. Most of the maintenance is going to occur probably starting about now, during the spring growing season and through the early fall, and where we now have 4 full-time parks employees for the DPW. And we also pick up typically 5 seasonal. So I feel as though we'll be adequately staffed to maintain that.
And then finally, I was wondering, has anyone looked into the cost of simply milling and repaving and redoing the sidewalks that are there, rather than the more extravagant landscaping?
I can tell you that the area from Route 12 southwest, you could not mill that. If you were to just mill that, it would fall apart. In fact, I felt from the beginning that we can't mill and overlay that. It has deteriorated too far to a point where it's not an adequate treatment for the pavement. So your only options would be to pulverize it, similar to what we're doing out in front on Central Street, or full depth reconstruction, which is what we did out on West Street when we constructed the new middle school. So those are the 2 things we're working with Mass Highway now on which way we want to move forward. And then the section from Route 12 to Walsh Ave, that is, at this point, is proposed to be mill and overlaid, because to your point, it's less expensive. And certainly, if you can move forward with that option, you're better off. The town is certainly trying to do the same thing on projects. We would prefer to mill and overlay a roadway if we can, but at some point they get deteriorated too far and you have to pulverize them or reconstruct them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, and as Julie mentioned, the state is paying for the roadway and the sidewalk work as well. Any other questions? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and as I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a call at the office, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. If I don't have an answer, I'll try to find one for you. Thank you.
Thank you.